The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Praise God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. This is what David proclaimed in a loud voice. I want to welcome each one of the viewers to Wonderfully Made. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to think about your health and how God created you. We have an exciting show today. We're going to be talking about winning the war with cardiovascular disease. I'm so happy to have as my guest here today, Dan Miller. Dan, welcome to Wonderfully Made.
Nice to be here.
Tell me a little bit about this Heartwise ministry we've been working on.
Well, Heartwise ministry was basically something that it was originated in 2005. It was a spin-off from it was basically a natural creation from your books, I should say. It's a ministry that the basic core of the ministry, their message is truth, love, and healing.
Now, why did you set it up with truth, love, and healing? Is it a progression, or?
It is a progression, I believe. Could be, for instance, when you find truth, you go to the Bible, and it's usually biblical. When you find truth in medical fields, it's something that you've searched for. Once you develop the truth of something, then you go to the next step, which would be love. Okay. Love is something that comes natural and is a message from God.
Right.
And then you go to the healing process. So it's a three-step process, I believe.
So in this, we have to have truth. We have to have truth to have true healing, right?
Right.
You know, I see so many myths out there about cardiovascular disease every day. You know, this diet's better than that diet. You can see the lies that are out there.
Correct.
And especially in the healthcare world, and it's hard for some people to sort of sort through this sometimes.
It affects your whole life. You know,
right.
if what you know about your life is not the truth, then it's going to affect you in a negative manner, sooner or later.
Right. We
all know that.
Right. So this ministry really is dedicated not only to finding the truth in health care, but finding the truth in life and the truth in scriptures as well.
Correct.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that, and there's a group of people out there, I believe, that are looking for this kind of a ministry to look at.
Now, we're talking about winning the war about cardiovascular disease.
Right. I was reading something the other day, Jim. It's just some statistics that I'm going to throw out there to you, see what you think about them. Spending on health care last year in the United States, $2.2 trillion.
Now that's all health care altogether, everything.
Correct.
Wow, that's a big number.
That's an amazing number. 2006, 900,000 heart attacks.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's just in the United States, right?
Correct. Think of a city maybe the size of what, Atlanta?
Wow, 900,000.
Everybody in Atlanta gets to have a heart attack this year.
That's incredible.
Out of those 900,000, 600,000 were new.
First ones, okay.
Correct. 300,000 of them were second, third, and fourth heart attacks.
Wow.
So that's interesting.
That's staggering.
And out of all of these, the 900,000 heart attacks, 42% of these people died.
Wow, that's a lot of deaths.
It's amazing.
You know, you would think a little bit about that. With all this going on, you would think that, you know, with that kind of money involved, you would think the government and everyone would be up in arms about fighting this disease. That's a lot more.
You would think that, but it's probably not the truth.
Wow.
13 million around the world die of cardio disease every year.
Every year, 13 million. Wow.
Now, I'm not really sure how to, you know, break those numbers down. In the first half of the 21st century, we're going to have an estimated 1 billion people die of cardiac-related disease.
That's at the rate, that's if we continue to have...
At the rate that we have.
Wow. Well, you know, our job here with Heartwise Ministries is to slow that rate down.
Correct. Right. And through the truth part of our ministry, that's what we're talking about.
Well, that's why it's so exciting about winning the war. We just don't want to win a battle. We want to win the war against cardiovascular disease.
That's a huge job.
Okay. Well, we have some questions from all over the world.
We do. Let's go to our first question.
Okay.
Our first question is from Margaret in Texas. She says, my name is Margaret, but it could easily have been Winnie the Worrier.
Uh-oh.
I think we both know somebody like that. Let me explain. When I was 8, my mom had a heart attack. Her sister had a heart attack a few years later. What can I do to lower my risks?
Okay. Well, the first thing, Winnie, you've already done to lower the risk. I mean, Margaret, I called her Winnie the Worrier. Sorry, Margaret. Margaret, the first thing you can do is recognize that there is a problem. Unless you understand the problem, a solution cannot be developed.
Correct.
So we understand that there's a problem here.
Right.
There are several things that raise a person's risk of having a heart attack. There's some things we can't do anything about.
What would those be?
For instance, your genetics.
Right.
The genetic material, the DNA that's passed down from generation to generation. Sometimes it's weak. Sometimes we don't have enzymes that digest the material. I mean, the enzymes that have to do with cholesterol. But your genetics can predispose you. Another thing we can't do is age, because as a person gets older, the chance of having a heart attack goes up.
Right. I've heard statistics, or percentages I should say, that 90% of all people create their own situation, and only 10%
is purely genetic.
Right. That's pretty astounding when you think about it.
They estimate that a lot of the heart attacks that are happening, a lot of this number that's happening can be prevented.
Right.
Now,
do you think that she is part of that 10%?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, she might have genetics, she might not. But Margaret, a couple other things. Now, you can't do anything about your genetics and your age, but the things you can do something about. Let's talk about those.
All right.
Your cholesterol level. Okay, the lower the cholesterol, the less risk you have of having a heart attack and cardiovascular disease.
Right. What is cholesterol?
Cholesterol is a lipid, which is a fat,
right,
okay, that we usually eat in our diet that gets deposited inside our bloodstream. Specifically in heart disease, it gets deposited inside the arteries of the heart, develops plaques, and this gradually can build up inside the arteries.
Okay. And then break loose.
That's right. It can break loose, or it can cause a problem. The next thing that Margaret can do is blood pressure.
Right. Okay.
Blood pressure is that internal pressure inside the vessels that if it's high over long periods of time, you can literally damage the inside of your vessels. They call high blood pressure the silent killer. You know why they call it the silent killer?
No idea.
Well, because some people don't even know they have high blood pressure because they never get it checked.
Right.
Never get it checked. I think men are the worst examples of this. They can go on for years and years and they never get a physical. You know, someone might say, well, you get checked, and it's been up for years and years.
So would you say even if you don't go to the doctor and get a physical, would it be beneficial to you to stop in the mall if they're having a blood pressure check and have that done at least?
I sure would. Now, most people take their car in to get it looked at every so often to get the oil changed. I mean, how much more important is your body
have your heart checked
than your heart checked? I think I would get it checked, you know, get my blood pressure checked, that nature. So Margaret, there's two things right there. We can work on our high blood pressure. We can work on our cholesterol. The other thing is smoking. I think everyone knows that smoking raises the risk of having a heart attack.
Right.
There's lots of dangerous chemicals in cigarettes that can raise our risk. In fact, it's been estimated if you can quit smoking cigarettes, you've lowered your risk of having a heart attack 50%.
Right. How about the fact that she's a worrier? She even named herself Winnie the Worrier here.
Yes.
That's pretty...
Yeah, and what worry does is worry raises your stress level. And we know that bodies are under stress. They start to make their chemistry changes.
Right.
Specifically, the level of stress hormones increase dramatically. The stress hormones might be called adrenaline or epinephrine.
Right.
Cortisol is another one. Aldosterone.
Right.
These all go up. Growth hormone goes up. And when these goes up, you get negative chemical reactions. You start to store cholesterol. So chronic worry and stress
affects you
is not
in a
helping
real
anything.
manner and not just perceived manner.
And later on, we're going to talk a little bit, Margaret, about ways that we can lower that stress level too.
Okay.
Now, other things that we can lower the risk that you have control over. You know, you don't want to. You know, when you want to be one of these that are not in the 10% that do have heart attacks. Obesity.
Right.
Obesity, inactivity. That's associated with a higher rate of heart attacks. It changes your chemistry for the bad too. And lastly, before we move on, is diabetes. People that have diabetes, it affects the blood vessels. They're more prone to have heart attacks, stroke, and cardiovascular disease. So there's a whole host of things here, Dan. So, I mean, but you know, a lot of people worry a lot. And
They do.
You know, they worry about it, and sometimes that worry, years and years out, it creates negative coping habits.
Mechanisms, yeah.
Right. You know, you're worried, you're stressed, so what do? You know, some people smoke.
Well, we don't in the United States take care of our stress and worry in the manner that other countries do,
Right.
for instance.
Right. We get in bad habits. You know,
Correct.
some people snack all the time.
Yeah, some countries have a nap in the afternoon.
Right, and those are some things we should start looking into, I
Yeah.
think, to lower this rate.
Right.
But I hope that, Margaret in Texas, I hope those suggestions are some things that you can do to lower your risk of having cardiovascular disease.
All right, let's go to number 2.
Okay.
This is from Frank in New York City, or at least New York. My bypass surgery was 5 years ago. My cholesterol is good. I exercise every day for at least 30 minutes.
That's good. That's very good.
My blood pressure runs 120 over 70.
Okay.
Is there anything else you can think of that will lower my risk of having more problems?
Okay. Now, when you talk about cardiovascular disease, we talk about the battle, and it looks like Frank has already suffered the battle. He's had bypass
Right.
surgery. But bypass surgery does not necessarily fix the problem. Remember, it bypasses around the blockages. The blockages are still there.
Correct.
Now, we talked to Margaret last about the things that she did to lower her risk factors. Okay? It looks like Frank is doing those. But there's other things that, what could I think that help him more? Well, stress. You know, we've talked about stress. Well, what are things that a person can do to lower stress? Well, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, I think there's many different things, and what's interesting about stress is what might work for you might not work for me.
Right.
A lot of people just, you know, real soft music will lower their stress. A lot of people think exercise has a big benefit for them.
Yeah.
I would personally think a lot of us dissipate our stress through the way we eat.
Mm-hmm.
Certain foods make us very comfortable.
Right.
In doing that, you kind of compound the problem that you're already trying to alleviate, though. So there's good ways to alleviate stress, and I think there's bad ways to alleviate stress.
Yeah. Well, Frank, in talking about stress, one of the things that I want to point you back to is the Bible.
Correct.
You know, one of the best treatments for stress is the God of the universe worked 6 days.
Correct.
And what did he do?
He rested.
He rested. How many of us get rest? You know, for instance.
True rest.
Yeah. If you jumped off a building, Dan, okay, this is a natural law. You would break when you hit the bottom, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Whether you believed it or not.
Right.
Okay? When we violate God's natural laws, for instance, the law of rest, when we violate that natural law,
We're affected.
right, whether we believe it or not,
Correct.
our chemistry changes inside, the stress hormones go up, and we predispose ourselves to having chemical problems inside.
Right.
So that's one thing, rest.
I would say that also, you know, being in the Bible through prayer and, you know, the Holy Spirit being able to come into your life and change you from the inside out, I think is a huge
thing to deal with stress.
also.
Now, another thing that we talk about stress, at nighttime, you know, our bodies are made to rest at night. When we don't get good rest at night, whether it be we stay up too late eating food, we're saturated by stimulants like the internet, television, telephones,
Caffeine.
Cell phones, beepers, everything's going off. We don't naturally rest. And you've heard of the circadian rhythms that we have.
Yes.
Those get disrupted. Guess what? It puts more stress on our body.
Right.
The next thing happens are these stress hormones, the epinephrine, the cortisol, all these go up again, and disease sets in.
And it's an unending circle.
That's right.
If you don't get control of it.
And the statistics that you quoted earlier, well, that's why we have such high statistics, because our chemistry is changing. We're not taking care of the insides, and we don't even recognize what we're doing.
Correct. That's a good point.
Now, I'm going to get back to Frank. There's a couple other things, Frank, that I could think of that might help you. And we talked about rest, water. I think water lowers your risk. 70% of your body's water.
And I heard something to the effect of a huge amount of people in the United States are chronically dehydrated.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Right. Now, I've read a study recently that said up to 70-75% are chronically dehydrated. We're drinking Starbucks.
Right.
We're drinking
Cokes,
caffeines, but we're not drinking water. You know, we didn't, in the Garden of Eden, for instance, you know, you didn't see a Starbucks or a Coke machine out there. They drink water.
It seems to me like water, you know, from a common sense standpoint, that water would be a natural agent, a washing agent, you know, to clean your system out with.
And if you think about it, all the chemical reactions in the body depend on water.
Right.
And without water, everything can go haywire. Now, for instance, if you're walking in a desert, okay, and don't get enough water, does your mind work right?
I don't think so, no.
No.
You start seeing things.
Right.
And,
So that, you know, the chemistry depends on water, and without water, it puts stress on the body.
right.
Stress on the body does all these bad chemical things. So, so those are some things that also. Now, one last thing that I think would help is you've heard of antioxidants. I think those lower your risk. We've also heard about being happy and laughing.
Right.
And then I
Correct.
think that's another biblical.
And being happy and laughing does what to your system?
Well, in Proverbs it says, "A merry heart doeth good like medicine."
Right.
We know that people that are laughing and happy, they make higher endorphins.
Right.
So get out there and have a good belly laugh. Don't take it so seriously. Be happy. So I hope those are a couple things, Frank, that might help lower your risk of having. Remember, we're fighting the war, Frank, and if we can get at what caused it in the beginning, stress, rest, diet, we have a chance of not having to fight the battles.
Right. Very good. All right. Number 3. Question from Joanne in Fresno, California.
Okay.
I read your book, Heartbeat. It was easy to read and talked about acute and chronic treatment for heart disease. Why did you divide treatment up? Would it be easier to talk about treatment altogether? What's the difference between acute and chronic to start out with?
That's a good. Acute is something, Dan, that needs to be done right away, right now.
Okay.
Okay.
While you're having a heart attack.
That's right. If you start having a heart attack right now here on the set, okay, of 3ABN, all the camera people are going to come and help. Okay?
Hopefully you'll be the one to help.
We'll be here helping you. We're going to get the cart going again, get the blood flowing. We're going to deal with the problem. We might have to take you to the hospital. We might have to do an angioplasty
Right.
stent. But we're not going to sit there and talk about stress and days of rest and your diet at that point.
Correct.
But when we get over, and so I think modern medicine is great for acute care.
Right.
Okay? But for winning the war,
It's a totally separate
exactly.
issue.
And you know, and you have to sort of divide it up because, you know, the battle's over, and I don't think that I think medicines have their place.
Correct.
But lifestyle changes and getting at what cause it. For instance, if the cause of your heart attack was stress, then we would work on ways to lower the stress level.
Correct.
And we'd have to determine what the stress is, whether it was lack of sleep, or let's say that you had a guilty conscience because your mind wasn't free from some of the
Untruths or
That's
whatever.
Right. Untruths
Yes.
or anything that damages your mind could have caused this.
Right.
So that's what we try to do. We try to focus on, well, what caused the problem in the first place? And if we can get at that, we've won the war.
So then at that point, what you're talking about is sitting down and creating a game plan.
Right, and that's why I divide acute and chronic, because there's so many people, for instance, they go one route or the other. Okay,
Right.
they fight the acute battle, and then they don't think, well, most people think to quit smoking cigarettes, but a lot of people don't think, well, what did I do in the first place to cause this problem to happen?
Correct.
And that's why I divided acute and chronic care.
Okay. Let's see. Number 4, Jim, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One of the problems I have is stress. Once again, we've got a question about stress. Obviously, everybody's stressed out. My doctors have tried everything. My job, kids, wife, and life in general. Nothing seems to help. Any suggestions?
Okay.
This is from somebody in Pennsylvania. They withheld their name.
Okay. Well, to my friends in Pennsylvania, I think we've sort of touched on some of these treatments of stress. And I think, for me, getting back to the source of truth.
Correct.
You know, you hear so much out there, you know, for the treatment for stress now. Some people do relaxation techniques. Some people take medications. You've heard of Valium and Xanax. But if we get back to the Bible, okay, get back to the Bible. What's the Bible teach us about stress? Okay, why did God give us these days of rest?
Right.
Why did God make us a good diet? I think getting back to the Bible and getting back to your spiritual side, that's going to help us find the truth. And the truth sort of frees us up from some of these things that are causing these stress.
Right.
And then it can lead us to real healing. That's why, you know, when we talk about Heartwise, we start with truth, we move to love. And then we move to healing.
It's a natural progression from one thing to another.
And in the book of John, what's that text? You shall know the truth.
And the truth shall set you free.
Right, the truth sets you free. And what the truth is knowledge about God.
Right.
Because when we know God sort of teaches us what love is.
Correct.
And that everything sort of stems from that.
Yeah, it seems like that was his greatest command in the New Testament.
So
they've tried everything else here.
Yeah.
So what would it You know, I think that you are hitting it right on the head whenever you say that the spiritual aspect of prayer and asking God to help with the
situation. You know, a lot of people I find when they talk about cardiovascular disease, and we see the prevalence of it, how it's all over America and all over the world. You don't hear it commonly to see a treatment for this is getting into the Bible,
right.
Getting God to heal you.
It's not a popular way to do things.
But you can change your chemistry through that healing process too. You know, I believe that God heals people acutely, raises people from the dead instantly.
Correct.
But another way I think he heals is slowly, by giving you the power through that relationship, that getting a little truth,
change.
Having that love in your life.
Right.
Then the next thing you do, you're able to make a better decision. Let's say you're a smoker.
Healing process.
Right, you're able to quit smoking, or you're able to exercise every day, or even learn how to rest better. I had a patient recently from New York City that he never was able to take rest. And just learning the principle of resting and vacations, his chemistry improved dramatically. So there's lots of ways to do that, but I want to try to point people, one of the things I want to is look at your spiritual life. Get back into the Bible. Pray that God will help you find out the source of your stress, and he will be the real treatment of the stress.
Right.
Okay, we have another question.
Okay. This is from Rhonda in Indiana.
Okay.
A book I read recently had a ton of suggestions on how to take care of your heart. Intellectually, I know all this is true, but making the change seems impossible to me. Am I alone in this?
Wow, Rhonda, that's a question I see a lot, is people know intellectually what they need to be doing. For instance, people know that they should be on an exercise program, and people know when they're not eating right that they might be eating differently. I think people know that if they're in a stressful job, they need to change that.
I mean, this is common sense related stuff. It goes back to your example of somebody falling off a building.
Right. It's a law. But am I alone in this feeling? No, Rhonda, you're not alone. A lot of people feel this way. Now, what can we do about it? How do we actually, take these principles that we've talked about to lower the risk of cardiovascular disease? How do we actually start an exercise program? Where does that ability to come from? Where does the ability to eat a little bit better come from, or drink more water? How does that happen? That's a great question.
It's good. Yeah, and in the end, we all know where it comes from.
Right, and I think it's getting God to take control of the mind.
Correct.
The mind is a very powerful thing. It says, "Create in me a new
heart."
A heart, which is a new mind. God wants to be in our mind and take control of our thoughts and our actions.
Everything we do.
And when he does that, then we have a chance of changing our behavior.
Right.
Now, why, you think, well, I try to do these things. Now, I see a lot of people that they try to make changes all at once, and then when they make a mistake,
they fall off the wagon.
They beat themselves up.
Yeah.
I mean,
with guilt and everything that's connected
I'm not
with
going to do this again.
Right.
I'm done with this.
I think all of us have gone through the guilt part of that.
Yeah, but one thing that I try to point people to is remember that God loves us. He loves us more than we can imagine. He just doesn't want us to hurt ourselves. With the things that he points out that's dangerous. When we break the natural laws, we hurt ourselves. But as we get to know God and see how much he loves us and wants to work with us and forgives us and takes us over, then as we make one decision at a time, it gets a little bit easier.
Correct.
Now let me give you an example here. I had a patient came in the other day, and she wasn't doing very many things right. And I didn't want to hit her with everything at once. I said, well, let's just start somewhere. Well, where do you start? Well, I said, well, I want you to just pray. Pray that God will come into your life and start reading the Bible, the source of truth. And then the next thing is maybe try not to eat big at night, okay? Mm-hmm. And let's get back together in a month. Mm-hmm. So she did that for a month. She made that decision, okay? She started looking for truth. God started responding to her, and she could do that. And she says, yeah, I feel better. I said, well, the next thing, let's start exercising. You don't have to do everything at once, but do this. So through a series of slow changes, she's changed her chemistry.
And that goes right back to the game plan that we talked about.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think, I think the spiritual life in treating any chronic disease is so vital and imperative.
Very, very important.
Because this is what changes your body's chemistry, is when you have that freedom, when you're able to love, when you're able to feel that peace. And for instance, Is it in Hebrews it talks about resting in God?
Yes.
Is it Hebrews?
Hebrews 4:4, wasn't it? It seems to me like
yeah,
that.
it's that rest, that peace you get. And when you have that peace,
your life changes.
and your chemistry changes
Right.
with it. Now, think about if I were the enemy, what would I do? I would create so much stressful situations, doubt, guilt. I would, people believing that they're not saved, that God doesn't love them. I would have the internet and TV bombarding me with
Right.
lies about health care. I would have all these other things to sort of make me feel discouraged, so I didn't feel like doing up. And then I would want a society to numb my senses,
Right.
so I wouldn't feel this way
anymore.
anymore.
And that goes right back to where Heartwise Ministries is concerned.
And people have to find the truth for themselves. Right. They can't depend, your body, you can't, I can't say this is true and you believe it. You have to find it for yourself.
You have to go look for it yourself.
Right. And we have a great textbook for that in the Bible.
Yes, we do.
Which one are we on now?
Let's see. We're on number 6.
Okay.
This is from Tom in Missouri.
Okay.
And this I'm going to have to break up a little bit because it's a long question.
Okay.
The other day I was channel hopping and saw you and Dan Miller talking about rest. You seem like regular guys.
Okay.
What you said made sense to me. No one seems to listen to me when I go to the doctor. They just want to write a prescription and send me on my way. I am a trucker, and at the age of 45, I want to stay away from pills. I know I'm rambling. My question, I'm rambling. My question is this: why do doctors just want to give you a pill? I know what Jim feels like. Yeah, I woke up one morning and felt like I was that famous singer from Memphis.
What was it? Oh, Elvis. Yeah.
I was to the point where I just was taking a pill for everything.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where finally I sat down with my doctor and told him that it's really a concern to me. And we sat down and talked about it. We talked about, made a game plan, just like you were talking about for your patient. And slowly, he drops back the prescription and so on and so forth. So you can't just stop taking your pills just cold turkey.
Right.
You do have to have a game plan.
Right.
If my doctor would not sit down with me and discuss these things in a logical manner, I would not continue.
Well, back to his question, a lot of reasons people don't listen. I mean, very few people listen like they should, and I don't know if this is your case, but one of the things we want to do is listen to people, meet them where they're at, and we want to learn to love them. Love them and figure out of love how to successfully change their chemistry. And one of the things I try to do is think about your chemistry, how we can change your chemistry from what it is when you're sick to a healing state. Right. And it goes back to those 3 things. We want to teach you what's truth, we want to love you, and then hopefully you'll be healed. We want to thank you, and hopefully you will win the war against cardiovascular disease.